You hear the creak of cartwheels on frozen ground. You smell tallow, the torches guttering against the cold. Then, only then, you see her, a woman beside a mule-drawn cart on a plain in central Spain. November 1506, past midnight. Between them, a lead coffin. She orders the lid opened. A torchbearer lifts his flame. Light falls on the face inside. She looks at her husband. She is 27. She is 6 months pregnant with her 6th child. Her husband has been dead for 7 weeks. The procession will only move at night because, she tells them, a widow should not be seen by daylight. Before this video ends, you will know the exact date her jailer admitted, in writing, to using torture ropes on the Queen of Castile. You will know her son read that admission, and you will know how he answered. For 3 centuries, this is the image history will keep of her. A woman staring into a coffin. The Mad Queen. 1 word. 2 syllables. La Loca. That word will erase everything else she ever was. In the next 18 minutes, 3 documents will tell you more than 5 centuries of paintings. First, the 1503 doctor's report from Mota Castle, cited for 50 years every time a man in her family needed her crown. Second, the admission letter from her jailer, Mosen Ferrer, written in 1516, where he names the torture he used on her. Third, the letter her son, Charles V, received in 1522, recommending that torture continue. If you want the Castile the telenovelas removed, this is the channel where it comes back. Subscribe. 500 years of historians have argued whether Juana was clinically ill. They still don't agree, and this is not where that argument gets settled. What matters, every time we pick up a life like this one, is a different question. When would you have broken? Most people know one version of this story. She loved her husband so much that when he died, she lost her mind. She carried his corpse across Spain. She kissed him in the coffin. She was insane with grief. That is the story Spanish Romantic painters turned into national myth in the 19th century. That is the story the telenovelas still repeat. Here is what they leave out. She was Queen Regnant of Castile for 51 years. She was the mother of Charles V, the man who ruled the largest empire in human history to that point, from Peru to the Philippines. She was the sister of Catherine of Aragon, the granddaughter of a Habsburg emperor. According to the court records reconstructed by Bethany Aram in her 2005 Johns Hopkins monograph, by the age of 12, Juana read Latin, spoke French, and corresponded in 3 Iberian dialects under the tutelage of Beatriz Galindo. She played the clavichord, and from the age of 29 until her death at 75, she lived in 1 room. 46 years, longer than she lived free. The coffin story is not wrong. It just arrived too late. By the time she was walking beside her husband's body in 1506, she had already been shattered by 7 years of precise, documented cruelty. The cracks were already there, and we know exactly who made them. Juana was born in Toledo on November 6, 1479. Her mother was Isabella I of Castile, the woman who financed Columbus, expelled the Jews of Spain, and founded the Inquisition. Her father was Ferdinand of Aragon. Together they were the Catholic monarchs, and they ran their household with the same ferocity they ran their kingdoms. The Italian humanists who tutored her, Antonio and Alessandro Geraldini, named in the Castilian court registers, described her the same way: serious, studious, gifted, and, the word they kept writing, melancholy. A quiet child, a child who preferred to be alone. Hold that word, melancholy. In 1490s Castile, a quiet, serious girl in a family of religious fanatics is not a problem. She is an ideal. Juana was the daughter Isabella had wanted, pious, obedient, useful for a dynastic marriage. No one at this point is calling her mad. The diplomatic reports from her childhood describe a princess, not a patient. Remember this, because everything you are about to hear happened to a person who started normal. The first brick was not madness. The first brick was isolation disguised as education. Juana grew up in a court where showing emotion was weakness, where her mother's approval was earned through obedience, and where even her tears had political consequences. She learned, very young, to go quiet. That skill would save her, and then it would be used against her. In August 1496, a fleet of more than 100 ships left the port of Toledo on the northern coast of Spain. On one of them was Juana, 16 years old, sailing to Flanders to marry a man she had never met, Philip of Habsburg, called Philip the Handsome, heir to the Burgundian Low Countries, 1,000 miles, weeks at sea. When she arrived, she did not speak Dutch. She did not know the customs. She did not know a single face. She was, by every account, beautiful, blonde, serious. And Philip, when he finally met her, was so taken that he demanded the marriage be consummated immediately before the official ceremony. They found a priest. They rushed the vows. For one evening, history will record, Juana believed she had been chosen. That is the last happy fact in this story. Within months, Philip was unfaithful. Not discreetly, not diplomatically, publicly. Philip kept mistresses the way other men kept horses. He lost interest in Juana's conversation almost immediately. He mocked her religious discipline. He complained to his advisors that Spanish women were too serious. Juana responded the way any young woman in that situation responds. She became obsessive. She tracked his movements. She demanded to know where he slept. She confronted the women she suspected. And the Burgundian court, which had no interest in a foreign princess making their prince look bad, began to write something down in the diplomatic reports. Jealous, unstable, difficult. Think of what Philip's court is building here as the paper trail a modern HR department keeps before dismissing an inconvenient executive. Every episode, every memo, every witness, filed, retrievable, ready for the day someone needs a reason to remove her, as the Habsburg court was 400 years early to the corporate playbook. That is brick number 2. Not her behavior, which was, medically speaking, the behavior of a young woman being systematically humiliated. The brick was the paperwork. Now, one specific afternoon, the year 1504. Juana had just made the long journey back to Flanders after giving birth to her 4th child in Spain. She was weak. She had traveled through war zones. She had spent months trying to reach her husband. She walked into the room where Philip slept, and she found him with another woman. Juana did not scream. She did not cry. She picked up a pair of scissors. She walked to the woman. We don't have her name. The court records wiped it. And she cut off the woman's hair. Some accounts say she went further, that she cut the woman's face. We can't confirm that part. But the hair is documented. Philip walked in. He saw what his wife had done. And he hit her. He hit her in the face, hard enough that Juana retreated to her rooms and did not come out for days. She refused food. She refused visitors. And this is the exact moment the machine begins to work. Philip writes to his advisors. He writes to his father-in-law. He writes to anyone who will listen. And the message is always the same. My wife is unwell. My wife is irrational. My wife cannot be trusted to rule. The man who betrayed her is now the man diagnosing her. And here is something worth knowing. The word hysteria, the diagnosis that will dominate European medicine for the next 400 years, that will lock women in asylums on 3 continents comes from the Greek hystera, meaning womb. Mark McHale, in his History of the Diagnosis, Approaching Hysteria, traces how the term migrated from classical medicine into early modern court culture as a category for female behavior that men could not govern. Philip's letters were not an original invention. They were a template. Every charting of an inconvenient woman's mind since has been a footnote to Burgundian correspondence. Meanwhile, something was happening in Spain that Juana did not ask for and did not want. Her older brother Juan, the heir, died in 1497. He was 19. His wife was pregnant. The baby was stillborn. Her older sister Isabella died in childbirth in August 1498. Her sister's infant son Miguel survived 22 months and died too. Count the bodies. Her brother, her sister, her sister's baby. By the summer of 1500, Juana, the 3rd child, the one who was never supposed to inherit anything, was the heir to the greatest kingdom in Europe. She did not want it. Every surviving letter she writes from this period is about Philip, about Flanders, about going home to her children. But her mother was dying. Isabella of Castile had cancer, though she did not yet say the word. And Isabella had decided that her homesick daughter needed to come back to Spain and learn to be a queen. In 1502, Juana and Philip crossed the continent to Spain for the official recognition ceremonies. The Cortes swore allegiance. The papers were signed. Juana was, legally, the heiress of Castile and Aragon. Philip stayed exactly as long as protocol required. Then he left. On December 19th, 1502, after a violent argument with his pregnant wife, Philip of Habsburg rode out of Spain and returned to Flanders. Juana would not see him again for 15 months. This is where she breaks the first time. She gave birth to her son, Ferdinand, in Alcalá de Henares on March 10th, 1503. And then, on April 5th, 1503, while she was still recovering from childbirth, her husband signed the Treaty of Lyon with King Louis XII of France. According to the diplomatic reconstruction in Aram 2005, the treaty promised Juana's infant Charles, the future emperor, in marriage to the daughter of the King of France. It also surrendered the Kingdom of Naples, which her father Ferdinand had just conquered with Castilian blood, to French control. Read that twice. Her husband had just traded her family's empire to their worst enemy. Without asking her, while she was in childbed, Juana did not fully grasp the political dimensions. She grasped one thing. Philip was in Flanders. She needed to go to him. Her mother said no. France and Spain were now openly at war. The overland route to Flanders passed through French territory. The sea route passed through French waters. There was no safe passage. Isabella had political reasons. She could not allow the heiress to chase a husband who had just betrayed them. And she had a mother's reasons. She was dying, and she wanted her daughter near. And she had pride. Queens of Castile do not run after unfaithful men. Queens of Castile do not beg. So Isabella had her daughter detained at the castle of La Mota, in Medina del Campo. And Juana, who had just given birth, who had not slept properly in weeks, who was now being told that the one thing she wanted was forbidden, Juana did something that every doctor at that court wrote down. She walked out into the courtyard in winter, half-dressed, and threw herself against the iron gates. She screamed until her voice gave out. She refused to come inside when the wind picked up. She threatened the Bishop of Burgos, a grown man, a political officer of the crown, with death and torture if he did not open the gate. When her own mother arrived to calm her, Juana cursed her in language the court scribes refused to transcribe. the royal doctors wrote a report in June 1503. One sentence of that report survives, preserved in the Archivo General de Simancas and cited by Aram. Reading it 5 centuries later, you can still hear the exhaustion of the men who wrote it. They said the princess was gravely ill, that she accepts neither pleas nor persuasion nor anything else, that no one dares apply force because the sorrow it causes her is a great pity. That is the first medical document in European history describing Juana of Castile as ill. It was written 4 months after childbirth, in the middle of winter, while she was held against her will by men who refused her passage to the husband she had crossed a continent to marry. This is also the pattern you already recognize. The difficult colleague in the meeting minutes. The unstable performance review filed the week before the firing. The inconvenient executive whose file grows thicker the quarter before she is escorted out. Philip's court invented the format. The 1,503 doctors completed the template. That report will be cited by her father and by her son for the next 50 years, every time they need something from her. She was released in 1504. She made it to Flanders. Philip was, as always, with someone else. And then, in rapid succession, the architecture of her life collapsed. Her mother Isabella died on November 26, 1504. Juana was now Queen of Castile. Legally, officially. In practice, her father Ferdinand refused to let go of power. He and Philip began fighting each other publicly over the right to rule in her name. She came back to Spain with Philip in 1506. For a few months, she was actually queen. Then, on September 25, 1506, Philip the Handsome died suddenly in Burgos. He was 28. Manuel Fernandez Alvarez, in his biography of Juana, concludes from the attending physician's accounts that the cause was fever, most consistent with typhoid. Rumors of poison circulated at court. No documented evidence confirmed them. Within 48 hours, the Castilian nobility was splitting into factions. Juana was alone, pregnant again, and technically the absolute monarch of the most powerful kingdom in Europe. She ordered her husband's body embalmed and sealed in a lead coffin. She decided to bury him in Granada, in the royal chapel next to her mother, what Philip himself had requested in his will. The procession moved slowly. It stopped at monasteries for rest. She traveled at night, which was standard protocol for royal funerals in Winter Castile, not evidence of insanity. And she opened the coffin only 3 times. Twice for religious ritual. Once because she had been told a rumor that the body had been stolen. Pedro Martir de Angleria, the humanist who was there, wrote about her during those weeks. He said she was quiet. He said she was grieving. He said explicitly that nothing unusual happened at the coffin. But by this point, it no longer mattered what actually happened. The narrative had been written long before, by Philip, by the Flemish court, by the Castilian diplomats who had a use for a queen too unstable to rule. When she stopped at the village of Torquemada in January 1507 to give birth to her 6th child, Catherine, the report that traveled back to the courts of Europe was not about a woman who had lost her mother, her husband, and her political independence within 3 years, while pregnant with a 6th child. The report was about the mad queen with the coffin. She arrived at Tordesillas on February 15, 1509. Her father, Ferdinand, escorted her there personally. She was 29. The palace of Santa Clara was comfortable. The staff was royal. On paper, this could be where the story closes. A grieving widow, retired to a quiet court, her children in safe hands, her crown held in trust by loving male relatives. That is what the official letters to foreign ambassadors say. That is what chroniclers for hire were paid to record. A story with an ending. And then Cardinal Cisneros opened an investigation. Here is the legal mechanism nobody explains in the Romantic paintings. Under Castilian custom, a reigning monarch declared incapacitated by close male kin could be placed under family guardianship, a tutela, without ever being formally deposed. The crown stayed on her head. The power left her hands. She was still, on paper, Queen of Castile. She was also, in practice, a prisoner of her own title. And this is what the paperwork of that imprisonment contains. In 1516, after Ferdinand died, Cardinal Cisneros, a Franciscan friar who had served Isabella and now ran Castile in regency, began investigating conditions at Tordesillas. Her jailer was a man named Mosen Ferrer, and Mosen Ferrer admitted in writing what he had been doing. He had been using something called la cuerda on her. La cuerda, the cord, was a technique of rope suspension with weights, documented in inquisitorial procedure manuals of the period as a method for extracting confessions from heretics. It was being used inside a Spanish royal palace on the legal Queen of Castile, to make her eat, to make her attend Mass, to make her submit. Cardinal Cisneros wrote back. His response, preserved at the Archivo General de Simancas, stated that such atrocities had been committed that the jailer had to be removed for endangering the health and life of Her Highness. And then he hired a new jailer, the Marquis of Denia. On January 25, 1522, Denia wrote a letter to the new king, Juana's son, Charles V. This letter is also held among the Patronato Real papers at the Archivo General de Simancas and is reproduced in Aram's appendix. In that letter, Denia recommended that it would serve God if the king continued to apply force to his mother in many things. He reminded Charles that Juana's own grandmother, Isabel of Portugal, had been kept the same way, by her daughter, Isabella the Great. He was saying, "Your grandmother did it. Your grandfather did it. Now it is your turn." Charles did not refuse. "Stay with me for 1 minute. You are 40 years old. You are in a stone room in central Spain. It is winter. Your window does not face the sky. It faces an interior courtyard, and beyond the courtyard, a wall. You have not seen the open horizon in more than a decade. Your 6 children are alive. None of them live with you. The 4 oldest were taken when they were very young. They grew up in Flanders with their Aunt Margaret. The 5th was taken by your father. The 6th, your youngest daughter, lived with you in this room for 18 years, a child growing up inside a prison. And then she too was taken away for a marriage you did not arrange. Your husband is dead. Your mother is dead. Your father is dead. Your son is the most powerful man in Europe, and he sends you letters you are not always allowed to read. Your jailer reports on you. Your food is controlled. When you refuse to eat, they have instructions, in writing, to apply force. At what age would you have gone quiet? At what month would you have stopped fighting? Because Juana, according to the records compiled by Aram and Fleming from the letters of Juan de Padilla and the Junta de Avila, kept fighting for decades. She refused to sign documents that would have stripped her of the crown. In 1520, when the Comunero rebels broke into Tordesillas and offered to restore her to the throne, she spoke with them coherently, lucid enough at 41 to negotiate the terms of their demands, and she refused to sign against her son, against the son who was imprisoning her. That is not the behavior of a woman who has lost her mind. That is the behavior of a woman who has lost everything except her mind, and is guarding it with what little she has left. Juana of Castile died on April 12, 1555. She was 75. She had been imprisoned for 46 of those years. 6 months later, her son Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, King of Spain, ruler of the Americas, the Philippines, and most of Italy, walked into a hall in Brussels, leaning on the shoulder of a young William of Orange, and abdicated. He was tired. He was sick. He wanted a monastery. His mother died in the spring. By autumn, his empire was dissolving by his own hand. The woman who produced the largest empire in human history did not see 1 meter of it. She did not meet her grandchildren. She did not know her sister Catherine of Aragon had been humiliated and discarded by Henry VIII of England. She did not know that her name, by the end, had become a shorthand across Europe for a specific kind of woman, the woman who can be safely erased. And here is the irony the 3 men never accounted for. They wanted a word that would make her vanish. Instead, they produced the most detailed documentary record of a silencing in all of Habsburg Spain. The 1503 doctor's report, the Ferrer admission, the Cisneros investigation, the denial letter, her own signatures refusing decade after decade. They erased her so completely that the erasure itself became the archive. That is what La Loca actually means, once you trace it back to who needed it. A woman stands on a frozen plain in central Spain. 5 centuries later, she is still standing there, and we still have not let her move. A word can bury a woman more deeply than any grave. Her descendants knew where her body was. They could not find her voice.